All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure where you guys are watching, and I apologize for being a few minutes late, but here we are. And I'd love to introduce our guest. Our guest today is Mr. Stan Lee. He is a 40-year veteran of the martial arts and has been teaching professionally since 1992. Inspired by Bruce Lee as a teen, he pursued a diverse martial arts path, earning black belts in Taekwondo and Judo and beginning his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey in 1993. He founded his own school in 1995, combining his martial arts passion with a background in business, sales, and finance to build a thriving program through the late 90s and early 2000s. Together with his wife, he co-founded Black Belt Principles, a company focused on character education for young children. A strong advocate for the after-school martial arts model, Stan believes it remains the best structure for school owners to grow their impact and income. Today, he enjoys semi-retirement, splitting his time between his yacht in the Caribbean and his home in Florida, where he remains active in the martial arts community. Mr. Lee, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's, as I said on the last couple interviews that I've done this year, it's been a long time in the running for us to get this interview. I think we talked about, I don't know, over a year ago for sure. And I wanted to have you on the show, and life just got in the way for a bit, but here we are, and now we get to have an awesome conversation today.
Yeah, that's been definitely looking forward to this one. This past year, I guess the word got out that I'm available as a podcast guest, and this is like the fourth podcast I've done in the industry over the last year, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what I love, what I get out of the podcast for myself personally is number one, it's a great way for us to reconnect. It's been a bit since since I've been to a super show or an event.
Right. Since
Haven't
they've had a
visited,
super show.
right, and I haven't visited Florida recently, so it's a great chance to connect. But at the same time, it's a great way for us to share some inspiration, education, and motivation for our day and our week. So I hope that everybody out there watching enjoys the show. And please, if you're watching live, would love to hear from the audience. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to talk about, please go ahead and post those in the comments. So let's jump right in. My very first question for you today. You've been in the martial arts world for over 4 decades. What originally drew you into martial arts, and what's kept you going all these years?
Well, I have to say, I don't know. I don't know where you're from originally, Jason. I'm from Pennsylvania originally. And in Pennsylvania, we have this state language called sarcasm. Maybe you've heard of it. I don't know. And I was born with an above average or exceptional skill in that area. And what happened is people would say things to me, and I would say things back to them when I was young. And when they couldn't top what I said, they would try to hit me. And I couldn't seem to keep my mouth shut. So I decided I better learn how to protect myself. So I was kind of lucky, or I don't know, unlucky. My parents at the time couldn't really afford martial arts training. And the only really option I had as a tween, so to speak, in these situations was to read books and try to educate myself. And one of the first books I came across was the Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. And so his philosophies inspired my martial arts journey from the very beginning. And obviously, I was watching Kung Fu theater, and I was watching him on the big screen, and he was definitely the man at the time. So I took that as gospel, and so I absorbed what is useful, reject what is useless. I tried to get information on many different martial arts styles, always with a focus on self-protection and not a focus on tradition, so to speak, or doing things the way they always used to do it, the classical mess, as Bruce Lee said. So I always pursued that. And when I finally went to college, I was accepted at 2 colleges. I was accepted at Penn State, where I could stay in Pennsylvania, or Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. And it was not a very difficult choice for me to get out of the cold and get to paradise, so to speak. So I moved here. And when I did, one of the things I always wanted to do was pursue formal martial arts training. And when I was at home in Pennsylvania, we practiced. My friends and I, we read books. We sparred with each other in a very free form, no instruction, not even any adult supervision, to tell you the truth, to pursue knowledge. And when I came here, I won a membership by putting my name in a box. Everybody won. It was a great marketing tool from my instructor. I won a membership at his Nautilus gym, and it came with a free month of Taekwondo. And I thought to myself, Taekwondo? I don't really want to do Taekwondo. That's a bunch of high, silly kicks and a bunch of forms. It's not really practical for what I'm a self-defense guy, right? And while I was working out in the Nautilus gym, I walked into my instructor's dojang, and there was a sign on the wall that said, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And I said, oh, maybe this guy is different. And so it goes, I definitely believe there are no bad styles in the martial arts. There are only bad instructors. There are people that are very rigid, and there are people that are open to knowledge and blending styles. And my instructor was an ex Green Beret, Vietnam veteran, 2 tours in Vietnam, 14 years in Asia. And he was definitely more interested in what worked than just specifically what his instructor told him. Matter of fact, he would tell me stories of how he's in Korea training, and they'd have a big curtain across the training floor. And on one side, all the Koreans were sparring, and all the American servicemen on the other side were doing forms. And he wanted to go on the other side of the curtain. He said, what are those guys doing? That looks great. And eventually found an instructor who was willing to teach him and willing to share the real information, so to speak. And so I started training with him. He was an early adopter of a lot of things. He had, being in Asia 14 years, he had studied Okinawan styles, he'd studied Judo, he'd studied Hapkido. And then I had mentioned in some of your interview questions that we also were very early adopters of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. My Taekwondo instructor had heard about the Gracies before the first UFC and flown out to Torrance, California, and taken privates with Hoist, and then brought back that information, as well as all the early VHS and beta videotapes, the Gracie in action videotapes, the early instructionals they had made, and started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as far back as '93. And then we found out that the Carlson Gracie team had a school in South Florida, in Miami. Conan Silveira, who's now the head MMA coach of ATT, and his brother were teaching out of Miami. So we would drive down there on weekends and take classes and bring them up for seminars. And it was great to be in an environment where the information was free flowing and there was no limits as to what we did. It also got my instructor in a lot of trouble in the Taekwondo. You know that in the Taekwondo universe, it's often looked at as, Taekwondo is all you need. You only need Taekwondo. And we actually held one of the first no-holds-barred challenge matches at a Taekwondo tournament in the early 90s, where Marcos's little brother, Marcelo, had a challenge match where he was willing to take on anyone. And this really hefty Taekwondo guy kind of took up the challenge. And this is in the middle of a Taekwondo tournament, and people are going wild. It's Taekwondo versus Jiu-Jitsu. And my instructor was under the impression that he was going to enlighten all these Taekwondo instructors, how they could bring Jiu-Jitsu into their lives and become more complete martial artists. Instead, what he got was a bunch of Taekwondo grandmasters going, what are you doing showing Taekwondo is not the only thing you need? So it was quite an experience.
Wow.
The Taekwondo guy lost, unfortunately, for Taekwondo, but he wasn't very prepared. He had no idea what was about to happen. No one ever seen a UFC video at this time. So
Right. Well, so listen, a couple of things come to mind as you're telling the story, and we'll dive in a little bit more on jiu-jitsu, and the impact that it had on you and your school. But two things stuck out to me as you were telling that story. One, getting involved with martial arts. You mentioned that you couldn't really afford martial arts, and I find this to be a common theme throughout so many martial artists, high level martial artists, people that have been martial artists for decades. That's a common story. I'm
Really?
just curious if you come across that a lot, or if you talk to other people. But I know for myself, my parents really couldn't afford martial arts. My dad was in construction, so fortunately, my instructor always needed something done. If anything else, holes being patched in the wall or something like that, right?
Hmm.
And so that's kind of how I was able to do it. My parents could afford it at the beginning because I started at a rec center. But then when we went over to the karate school, there's different costs involved, and at one point they just couldn't afford it. So my parents had to trade out. But a lot of instructors, a lot of school owners I've talked, have you ever found that to be the case when you talk to other people?
I haven't found it when it comes to instructors, but I definitely find it when it comes to successful entrepreneurs.
Right.
Because if you're going to be driven to work the kind of hours we work to make the investment we make, you're usually coming from a place of hunger,
Yeah.
of I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So I think it may just be that you're not just interviewing martial artists, you're interviewing successful martial artists who
Mhm.
built lives for themselves in it, right? And if you're
Right.
going to find that, that's going to definitely come from a place of I'm not someone who was handed everything in my life. I had to earn it.
Right.
And I think that's probably more of a common theme is the most of the successful entrepreneurs that I know didn't start with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Mhm.
They started from a place of I'm going to do better than my parents. I'm not going to be my kids aren't going to be the ones that are starving to death or don't have the best toys on Christmas or whatever it is that motivated you, right?
Right.
So I'd say definitely from an entrepreneurship perspective, most people come from at least lower middle class or poverty, right?
Right. Humble beginnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that stuck out to me, and I come across this a lot, was your distinction between self defense and self protection. A lot of people talk about self defense, and you use the term self protection.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that.
I don't think that I have a huge difference between the two. I think that a lot of people do confuse um, their training as all self-defense when so much of the martial arts industry is more focused on keeping tradition alive or adhering to the rules of the game, so to
Mm,
speak. There are so many, and this is not just in traditional martial arts. This is definitely the case with the current generation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Almost everybody is focused on chasing gold medals and not really paying attention to the fact that the rules are protecting you most of the time. It's not your own skill or your own control of distance.
mhm.
So I don't know if I see a big difference between that, although self-protection probably encompasses a lot more than just physical self-defense. There are a lot of threats in today's world, everything from cyberbullying to financial fraud. There are so many ways you need to protect yourself in today's world. It's a complicated subject.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I don't know if you noticed there's a little glitch in the camera or something. At every once in a while, you cut out, so I apologize if I don't always hear that last word.
Mhm.
Um, but hey, we got a couple people watching, and I'm just wondering who is watching. Number one, let us know where you are, and again, if you have any questions, if you're watching us live, would love to hear some of your questions or any feedback you have. But we're talking a little bit about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so, what was it? Well, you kind of explained, what sparked your interest. But how did people react at that time? The early 90s, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was fairly unknown to the mass, majority of people until the UFC came about. And, kind of the whole premise of the UFC was Taekwondo versus Jiu Jitsu or Judo
The
versus
early UFC,
karate, or
yes.
right. I mean, that's really, I mean, and they even labeled it. I mean, on the very first UFC, it would be this fighter karate, this fighter, Kenpo. And it was really like to find out what was the best. And ultimately, I think, the real thing was let's prove that jujitsu is the top dog.
Well, certainly that was Horian Gracie's plan to
Right.
build his business.
Right.
Uh, I thought I was always interested in what worked, and we had heard about the Gracie family's reputation through friends of ours who were also students of theirs. And the idea was that you had a family that was supposedly undefeated, right, at the time, and we definitely wanted to add anything to our arsenal. I mean, we already had judo experience, we already had Japanese jiu-jitsu experience, so we understood jiu-jitsu, but their particular take on it was very interesting. And studying it, it was definitely not something that everybody was influenced by media, right? So the martial arts movies and everything, whether it be PKA kickboxing or anything that you've seen about martial arts, including Bruce Lee's movies, was often all about striking. So there was a real lack of grappling knowledge across the board in the public eye at that time. So I think that the UFC definitely helped providing that laboratory. And I was really active in the early UFC. I actually founded a lobbying organization back in the day called the Pro Mixed Martial Arts Movement in North America. And we were specifically involved when the UFC went, when John McCain led his political attack on it, which you know, as my Facebook friend, that politics is and economics is a side item of mine. And one of the reasons that got me involved in politics was when politics came after my favorite thing, which was MMA at the time. John McCain, you know, pushed to get it excluded from cable television. You could only get it on satellite. There were a lot of states that were banning it. And at that time, myself, along with other friends on an early combat list on the internet, back when we had message boards and message lists with email, were big MMA fans and big early UFC fans. And we founded this organization to promote the sport as being safer than boxing and so on and so forth. So I met with state senators and sent off packages of information and statistics to try to promote the sport. And this was back when SEG owned the UFC. And it was great because matter of fact, Jeff Blatnick, back when he was recording, I don't remember which event it was, actually thanked me on the air for all the lobbying work we had done to try to promote the sport and stop it from being just destroyed at the time. And they used to send me early VHS tapes and T-shirts and all kinds of things for some of the lobbying work we had been doing. It was a very interesting time to be involved in MMA back then. You had, you know, one side yelling and pointing fingers and screaming human cockfighting, and then you had the other side of people going, oh, wow, this is a really great laboratory to show us what really works, right? And even then, though, I mean, the UFC still has rules, and it's gotten even worse now in today's world, where, you know, you can't hit somebody, you can't kick somebody when they're down, you can't, there's all kinds of rules. You can't if somebody has 3 points of contact with the ground, you can't throw a leg straight to the head. It still isn't really self-protection, but it's the closest thing we've got.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has changed. It's evolved in so many different ways. You know, I was kind of lucky enough to be a fan of it and watch it from the beginning. And, you know, I think what we see now is more refined athletes in general. And yeah, I like the early years. I like
Sort of
less, I like a little less rules, but if the goal was to be an athlete long term, we both know, just like football, rules were put in place so that guys can play football longer, right? And in the end, it is a business too, so we need to keep everybody lasting a little bit longer so we can keep the business running.
For sure, and it's also a business in the way of your other favorite pastime. Now there's just as much drama and professional wrestling style wordplay back and forth to try to draw people in to buy. It's all about selling the pay-per-view at this point, for sure. So I'm not a big fan of that aspect of it. I'm still on we should show respect and self-discipline. I do keep that part of the traditional program alive in what I do. So I'm less of a fan of trash talking when it comes to martial arts. But that you do need to sell the tickets if you're going to keep it moving.
Of course. Well, and of course, you're speaking of pro wrestling, which is
Right.
definitely still a huge passion and pastime of mine. I mean, isn't it interesting too that the same company that owns the UFC also owns WWE, and
Yes.
I can't wait to see a little more crossover. But yes,
Hmm.
that in that respect, it has changed dramatically. Well, speaking of business, right? How did your background in business and finance shape the way that you built and scaled your martial arts school?
Well, I originally, if I thought back or in my early youth that I could actually make a living on a yacht and a house by the beach and all these toys, and if I had known I could do that owning a martial arts school, I would have went straight in that direction,
Mhm.
because that would have been the perfect life. But when I was younger, the people I knew that taught martial arts had a real job and taught martial arts on the side and were generally not wealthy men. And like I said, I was driven to live a better life than my parents. And so when I graduated college, I actually took a job as a stockbroker, and I did that for 2 years. But I had an occupational restriction called integrity, that made it difficult for me to succeed in that particular line of work. I mean, I was successful, but when I realized what the people I worked for were actually doing, it was not something I could see myself doing long term. So I had taken the money I had made and moved back into my martial arts instructor's house, went back to where I was in college, and started training again and getting back shape. Because for 2 years I worked, I was on a phone from 9 in the morning until 9 at night, 6 days a week, selling securities and mutual funds and so on and so forth. And I had gone from graduated college, 190 pounds of solid muscle, ripped. I was a specimen at that time, and I came back weighing about 170 pounds of because I've got the kind of metabolism that if I'm not hitting the weights or so on and so forth, it just melts off. So I started training, and at that time, my instructor wanted to take his hardcore fighting school that he kind of did as a hobby and turned it into something that might make him some money, right? Make him a little better life. And so he asked me if I would take my sales and business experience and apply it to his school. At the time, I was planning on maybe joining another firm or doing something else in finance, but I decided I wasn't doing anything at that, and I thought I'd give it a go. So we started going to early educational funding company seminars and learning how to apply business principles to running a martial arts school. And we did really well. We got his school up into, I don't know if you remember, if you're ever with EFC, they used to have belt rankings for all the different
Hmm.
schools on their monthly tuition collections. And
Right.
I got his school up to like high red belt in the 90s, and it was doing, 25, $30,000 a month back when that was nearly impossible.
Hmm.
And my instructor was very thrilled to death at this idea that he could actually make money teaching martial arts. But one of the problems is that he started going a little too far in that direction. He started wanting to take away all the things that I respected about his school, the self defense focus, the focus on contact and application, and started moving in the other direction. He started copying curriculum from other martial arts schools like Steve LaValle's down in Fort Lauderdale and stuff, with these schools that didn't have any contact or didn't do anything real at all. And we started butting heads on that end because I felt he was selling out to a degree, if you want to call it that. And I understand his motivation. He was getting older. He needed to put some money in his retirement account. He was motivated to do that. And so we ended up splitting. And a year later, I decided to open my own school, and I wasn't even sure I was going to do that. But I had worked a bunch of odd jobs after leaving his school, and I had worked as a bouncer and ran a telemarketing room and done a whole bunch of things. And I ran into one of my old students in a Publix, actually, in a supermarket. And when I left my instructor school, it was kind of abrupt. I didn't really have a chance to say goodbye to all my students and everybody I'd been teaching. And this guy had come up to me and he said, "I just wanted to thank you for everything you did for me when you were teaching. You saved my life." And I said, "What do you mean I saved your life?" Well, it ends up that this guy was a family man, a father. He had his wife and his 2 kids in our program, and he came to class one day with wine on his breath, and I smelled it, and I pulled him aside and I gave him a come to Jesus talk that you need to be setting the proper example for your family. You've got children here. You need to be living by these principles and not just giving them lip service. Well, based on that conversation, he changed his whole life. He quit.
Wow.
He quit alcohol. He changed himself up. He lost a bunch of weight. He eventually got his black belt from my instructor. And he said basically it changed his entire life. Was I was willing to come at him with truth and inspire him that he could be much more than he was. And I just about started crying in the grocery store because I'm like, I'm not changing anybody. I'm not saving anybody's life as a bouncer in a nightclub, right? Obviously I need to get back to teaching, and that's what it really inspired me to start my own school. And yeah, that's where it all started. I started teaching in a YMCA. Within 3 months, I had 35 students and enough money coming in to rent a commercial space. And one of my students owned a building. He owned a bank building and had some space upstairs that he couldn't rent to anybody else because the parking lot was full from 9 to 5. But I did all my teaching from 5 to 9, so he could rent it to me, but not to anybody else. I couldn't afford an apartment, so I had a futon and a microwave in the back office of my school and lived there for 2 years
Wow.
and built it up from nothing. And now I'm, you can see, I don't know if you can see out the window and see the palm trees in the background. Life is great.
Yeah, life is great. Well, it's so amazing to hear those stories, specifically the one about how, martial arts and you as an instructor were able to change and transform someone's life. I mean, sometimes, I think business owners get caught up in their business and making a living and taking care of their family. But what we don't realize is that sometimes just that simple conversation, sometimes that, as you said, the come to Jesus meeting was what he needed to make the change in his life. And so, yeah, I mean, how great is it that not only you get to live, the life you wanted to live,
Mhm.
a more stable life with knowing that you've made a change and made a real difference in people's lives. We're going to take a quick break here and show one of our sponsors of the show. This is Insurance Brokers West. Thank you to Insurance Brokers West, who sponsors our show and is a great supporter of all that we do. Thank you. And if you need any information or me to connect you with them, please let me know. I'm here with Stan Lee. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast. Man, we've already covered a ton of stuff, and we're just getting started. We've talked about Stan's start in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and his philosophy of the martial arts and how he started his martial arts school. If you missed any of that, you may want to go back and check it out. But what I want to get into now is talking about how you created or what inspired you to start the Black Belt Principles, and what impact have you seen in character development through teaching martial arts?
Well, I think it's very important, and part of this goes back to your previous question on how my business and sales experience had impacted. And when we had spent a lot of time going to seminars and talking to successful school owners, and the one thing that I found, and the one thing that I didn't want to do, was to water down my curriculum in pursuit of commercial success. And I thought to myself, how can I keep my integrity? How can I teach what I believe in, but still be commercially successful? And the answer was that the people that are making decisions, especially enrolling children in martial arts programs, are often moms, sometimes moms and dads, but they all might have different expectations. The moms are less interested in that child having a crisp jab cross punching combination or a perfect triangle choke. they're a lot more interested in their child becoming more confident, having more discipline, being more respectful, having more focus, and doing better in school, and getting all those intangible benefits that martial arts is known for providing. And we found for sure that if I was going to make a commercially successful school without watering down my curriculum, I needed to make sure that we did character development better than any other program or any other activity out there. So we really focused on communicating character development, especially to our youngest students. I'm one other concept that I've spoke at a number of martial arts trade shows is the idea of the lifetime value of a student. That if you're going to make a commercially successful business, you need to figure out what your ideal student is, and you need to keep them as long as possible. So
Hmm.
I'm really not a fan of the I've got to enroll 50 people this month in order to pay my rent school model. I'm a fan of enrolling a small number of high quality people and keeping them forever. And so we like to start students as young as 3.5, 4 years old. And we want to give the parents real results with character development, real behavioral changes in a very short period of time. And to do that, what you have to do is you have to learn to communicate in a language that those children understand. And right now, those children are absorbers of media. Everywhere you go, these kids are carrying a tablet around. They're watching Bluey or Blue's Clues or this, that, or whatever. And that's where they're absorbing a lot of their information. So my wife's background is she's an ex-television actress, theatrical actress. She has a degree in film production, and her expertise is in children's media. She was a theatrical actress and toured the United States and Canada, putting on morality plays, teaching character development to children all over the US and Canada live, producing these plays. And so it was a combination of her background and how we saw that the martial arts is such a great tool for teaching character development that we would put her media background and my martial arts background and teaching background together to create a product that would um, teach character development through martial arts and hold the attention. Little kids learn through example. They don't learn verbally. They learn more visually, right? Just like if you in your school, Master Flame, were to pull a 4-year-old out and teach them a front kick, you're not going to tell them, okay, I want you to walk over here. I want you to pick your knee up until your thigh is parallel with the floor, flex your quadriceps, extend your foot forward, striking with the. If you did that, they would just be looking at you with a very blank stare, right? A blank stare. That's not going to happen at all. But if you walk up to the bag and you demonstrate a front kick, they can usually pick it up in a few tries, right?
Hmm.
So they learn through that, through our behavior, through our demonstration. So by creating, my wife created this wonderful, cute set of characters that the kids that are visually striking and they get the kids' attention. And by using visual aids and video clips, we can create situations where there's an opportunity to show discipline or an opportunity to show self-control. And we can teach it to them in a way they can easily absorb these abstract concepts. And it's been hugely popular. It was hugely popular through the martial arts industry back before COVID, when the martial arts industry was huge. I think it's substantially smaller now than it used to be. But the people that survived are stronger, right? And then she also built that into a small empire of children's books. She's now written over 10 children's books using those same characters and the same messages that have become tremendously popular. For some reason, the books on anger really stand out. I think a lot of people have a lot of angry children now. I don't know what that has to do, whether it has to do with COVID or their lack of social skills from not being social for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it was. But it's really well, and there's some really big things happening with that. My wife is technology just improves, and she's in the process right now of developing more digital based communication tools, games, videos, curriculum that is going to not only be available for the martial arts industry as the children's books are, but available to homeschool groups, preschools. She's kind of going worldwide with the curriculum and taking what we developed and were successful within the martial arts industry and making it available everywhere.
So tell me, where did Harry's name come from, and why
The,
why?
the main character, yes, my wife is a creative to the core. And the story she still sticks to is that she created this character when she was in middle school for a creative writing class she was taking. And she was in the South, and it was around Christmas time. And if you live in the South, you know that little reptiles are all over the place, right? These little lizards that, well, supposedly there was a little lizard on her Christmas tree in her house that poked its head out and had some red tinsel on its head. And she saw him and she was inspired to create Harry the Red-Headed Lizard. I don't know, but the kids love him, and he's very popular. We had some great voice actors to voice him, and he's been a hit. So that's where that particular character came from. And you know, a lot of the other characters in the books and videos are based on children from the martial arts school. You know, we've got kids that
Yeah.
have gone through life lessons, and she's snatched that child's personality and modified it, put it into a little animal character, and there they are. So
Mhm.
it's, and that's another reason why the kids are so they're drawn in by this, is a lot of these situations are based on real situations. They're things the kids can really relate to.
Mhm.
It's not like I don't know how to describe it. A lot of the media that kids absorb are fantasy based, right? Where somebody's living on the clouds and doing this or doing that. Everything in our books are all about real kids who go to real school and go to a real martial arts school and wear a uniform, and they get all their character development information from their martial arts instructor, just like most of our students do, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and that's one of the reasons the kids can relate so much to the characters, is they're just like them. They have the same problems they do, and they overcome them in the same way. It's a little more realistically based and not fantasy based.
And none of those voices are you.
No, I actually do play Instructor Dan in
You
the
are
cartoon.
okay.
I do
Okay.
play the instructor, and that's great because it doesn't involve any acting. I'm not an actor. She says, "This is the situation. How would you teach it?" And okay, everybody, this is Instructor Dan, and this is what we're going to do today, right? So it's just from my experience, and so almost very little of what is written in the books from Instructor Dan was scripted. It's She asked me how I would handle that situation, and that's how it's handled.
There you go. Well, let's switch gears here. That's an awesome backstory on that too. But I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys are doing next. But the next topic, just you've been a big advocate of the after school martial arts model. What makes it so effective, and how can school owners implement it successfully?
Well, that's a great question, Jason, because especially right now, let's face it, we're in uncertain economic times, right? And those things have happened a few times in I mean, I've been, my school, it's our 30th anniversary in 2025. And I've seen, you know, the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and the Iraq war, and this, all kinds of things come and go. And it's a lot better to be in the business of providing needs than providing wants,
Mhm.
right? After school martial arts is a necessity, not a luxury. Because the first thing people are going to cut in uncertain financial times are their luxuries, things that they don't absolutely have to spend money on. They're going to pare that back until they see exactly how things are going to work out. Where our after school program is still booming and full because people need a safe place for their kids to go after school. And what we provide is such an incredible head and shoulders above the competition. It's very difficult for the other after school options to compete with what we do. I mean, we're providing exercise, self defense, character development, and a safe, supervised environment where the average after school program is a bunch of kids in a cafeteria, lightly supervised while people are on their phones, learning bad language and getting bullied. That's basically the after school industry outside of martial arts schools. So it's a huge opportunity. And I talked a little bit about the lifetime value of the student. These students are paying me almost $100 a week, and more than that in the summer and summer camp, 52, almost 50 weeks a year, rather than paying 150 or $170 a month for a regular martial arts membership. So the revenues are at least double. The costs are a little higher, but when you've got revenues that high, the costs become easily absorbed. We provide transportation. I have a fleet of buses. They go out to all the local elementary schools and middle schools, pick kids up, bring them to our facility for training. We have a great system of keeping them moving, keeping them entertained, and making sure they get a little time to work on their homework. Everybody gets a martial arts class every single day. We're definitely not. A lot of martial arts instructors go, I don't want to run a daycare. Well, then don't. You have these kids for 3+ hours a day. Teach them, right? You don't have to be a daycare. You control what's going on in that time frame. Teach them, right? So like I said, we train every single day. And who's going to be a better martial artist? Somebody who does 2 45-minute classes a week over a few years, or someone who's trained 5 days a week from kindergarten through 8th grade? Who's going to be a better martial artist? The kids I create are phenomenal martial artists that I would put them up against anyone, because they're training every single day. It's part of them. And their parents are thrilled to death to have this option, especially in uncertain economic times when they're cutting. Some parents are cutting back on extracurricular activities, but in order to still have their child have that experience, they enroll them in my after school program and move them from the school's after school program so they get both. So it's a one-stop shop, and I'm making their martial arts training as convenient as possible, where they don't have to run them back and forth to 14 extracurricular activities in the evenings. They pick them up from me, and their extracurricular activity is already finished. So there's so many advantages to the after-school model, both from a financial perspective, from making better martial artists perspective, from an economic perspective. It's and they don't quit. Period. Their parents need a safe place for them to go. So I mean, here's a concept for you. We have testing in my after-school program every 2 weeks, and most of those kids fail their test. They don't quit. They've learned to fail, pick themselves back up, and work harder for 2 weeks later when we have another testing session. So I'm like the anti-participation trophy school. Do you understand what I mean? We have standards, and either you meet those standards or you keep practicing until you do. If you didn't, right? And to me, it's great to be able to sleep at night and to know that I'm creating awesome martial artists, and I'm really teaching perseverance, and I'm teaching how to come back from failure and do things even better than you did before. And in the martial arts industry today, there's very little of that. The only people that survived are the participation trophy schools that if you show up to class every day, you still get your belt. Or they have testing and everybody, 3 of the kids do the move wrong. 1 kid does the move right, but everybody gets their belt. I'm not a big proponent of that model of martial arts training.
Tell me, when it comes to after school martial arts, different laws and guidelines and restrictions apply in every state different. I mean, I know in California, our laws for childcare, because in a sense there is childcare
Right.
happening, is very different than it might be in Florida. So what do you say to schools when they're first learning about how do I apply to be one, or what
Yeah.
is some criteria that I need to have? Because in my school I have 2,000 square feet. I have a huge seating area, and I have a huge mat, and that's kind of it. So
Yeah,
my school would have to change in order to
right.
do that, and also to meet some criteria that might be California law, which I'm sure maybe you're not familiar with, but help us
I
out with that
am.
just a little bit.
Well, I've done a lot of consulting for schools that wanted to start an after school program. People have seen my success. They've asked me for advice. And definitely government regulation in some states makes it very, very difficult. Florida, of course, we like to call ourselves the free state. It's a little, there definitely is regulation, and I am considered in the state of Florida a child care center exempt from licensure. And the reason is that we only deal with school age kids. We only have them for 4 hours a day. And that sidesteps, I do not have to have, I know we don't serve food. We don't prepare food. So we sidestep a lot of those regulations because of the way the rules are written. So all of my staff do have to go through the state background check system as part of being a child care center, right? But I don't have to have X number of square feet of outside play area and X number of square feet of stainless steel kitchen to prepare meals, or my staff do not have to take training to learn how to change diapers and do a bunch of other silly things that have nothing to do with what we is. So the best thing I can say to schools in California or Illinois is lobby your state legislators to get a better legal system. I can't do much to overcome that. But most of those laws are not about protecting children. There's a daycare lobby that puts those laws in place to protect you from competing with them. So, but that's a whole other political discussion that we're probably not going to get into.
Let's not talk about our governor for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, let's not
let's
do that.
let's not. Well, let's change gears to another topic that is something that I understand a little bit about, or a lot about, since
Mhm.
my wife and I have been running our martial arts school together since the very beginning in 1994. So, running a martial arts school with your spouse can be both rewarding and it can be challenging. What's your secret to making that partnership work?
That is a very, very, very difficult question. I was very lucky that when I met my wife, she she already loved kids. She already worked, like I said, she was already a theatrical actress and a television actress. My wife was the original Fox Kids Club hostess. I don't know if you remember Fox Kids Club. She was the first Fox Kids Club hostess where she would be an on-air talent in between the cartoons, telling kids not to change the channel and wait till you see what's coming up next on the Power Rangers. And so she was used to, I mean, she was going to malls and signing autographs and she was used to children. So that part didn't scare her. And when we first met, she right away dove into asking me how she could help. And I was very blessed in that way, that not only did she have experience and she was good at it, she embraced it. And I don't know if you can put that down as your requirements on Tinder. I don't know how you're going to find somebody like that. I was pretty lucky. And I guess, the hardest part on that is up until recently, my wife and I had been together about 24 hours a day for nearly 25 years. We were apart for 2 3 month periods recently because my yacht is in the Southern Caribbean and was hit by a Category 5 hurricane. And I had to fly down there and supervise its rehabilitation. And although many people, both in martial arts and in sailing, have been jealous of me finding a wife willing to do all these crazy things with me, she was not interested in living in a shipyard full of fiberglass dust and participating in that part of the adventure. So she was here supervising my school's operations while I was there dealing with that. And I can tell you that it is very unique to find someone that you can be with 24 hours a day and not want to choke them, especially when you're capable of choking them, right? So that I wish I had an answer for how to do that. I know probably the closest thing we do is when my wife and I come home from working together all day, I tend to come back here into my family room and get on my computer, play some games, surf the web, do whatever. And then she has a massage chair in the living room and a 60 plus inch television where she's my wife is still a big fan of the film industry. So she watches movies and watches television, but she watches regular television like we watch martial arts movies, right? She's very, they shouldn't have done that. That was a bad cut. They should have, the director should have had him do this. So she
Right.
looks at that the way we look at martial arts movies. That'd never work. Yeah. So, so honestly, a little bit of alone time when we get home lets us clear our heads and come together maybe a little bit later for something we can mutually enjoy. But it's definitely tough to be with someone 24 hours a day. Um, and you know, my wife unfortunately does not train in the martial arts anymore. She did for a good part of the early. She got up to a high brown belt in my system, but it was very difficult for her, especially once we got married, to take direction from me and call me sir. That part was difficult for her.
Yeah, a lot of the things that you're saying, I can completely relate to. My wife was not a martial artist when we met.
Mhm,
There's a long story that I'll save for another time with that. But when
mhm,
she started in martial arts, it was actually kind of easy for her to learn from me, and allow me to coach her. But what I really loved is when we started the business was that everything that I didn't like to do, or all the things that I was not good at, that's where she was strong, right? And so
right.
our strengths complemented us so much. And from the early years, I mean, almost from the beginning, she was training, and then when we opened the school, she was teaching. And currently not as active as she once was, as far as physically on the mat. But I
Mhm.
mean, her presence in the school is still felt. And a lot of what we do in the school comes directly from her heart. I always say that she's the heart and the soul of the school. I'm just the body and the mouthpiece. That's just kind
Yes,
of how we work.
I.
And when we go home, see, now my kids are doing my kids have always done martial arts. My kids are involved in the business now. My
Mhm,
son teaches 6, sometimes 7 days a week. My
mhm.
daughter's here at the front desk. She's dating our head instructor. So it's like, when we go home from the karate school, we don't really go home from the karate school. As soon as we get home, we're talking about who did what in class and how this student's doing. And one of the things that I think our students, and I hope that they hear this, will understand that when we go home, it doesn't turn off for them. Like martial arts for our students, that's their extracurricular activity. They go home and it's like, okay, baseball's tomorrow and we're going on vacation next
Mhm.
week. But we actually go home and think about these people and think about these families and think about their well-being. And like you said, I love it that you want students for a lifetime. I
Mhm.
think the same way. I mean, I
Mhm.
want to have students that I've watched students graduate high school, graduate college, get married, have kids. Unfortunately, have been with them, when they had to deal with a death, divorce, all these things, man. And it's just, if I didn't have my wife in the business with me, it would feel very lonely for me. It would be very hard to deal with all of those things that I just discussed
Mhm.
without having her engaged and involved. I could be telling her about my day, but she might not really understand the
Right.
same way. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, for sure. And as when we've run schools as long as we have, like you said, you started yours in 94, I started mine in 95, and I taught for my instructor for 2 years before that. I don't know if you're experiencing this, but to me, talk about having integrity, talk about feeling fulfilled or having legacy or whatever it is. It happens quite often right now where I walk into my school and one of my instructors is teaching an introductory lesson. And the father or mother will walk up to me and say, "Excuse me, sir, I don't know if you remember me, but you used to teach me when I was a kid." And now they're bringing their children to my school. to because they want the same experience for them. Talk about a vote of confidence. That's much stronger than a 5-star Google review. You are trusting your children to me because of what you experienced when you were a kid, and it was that memorable and that life changing for you. And I have this happen all the time now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure in your town, just like I am in my town, we've become icons. We become, landmarks in our towns because you've affected so many children, and those children grow up and they have children, and everybody knows your name. And that's one of the things I love about the small town that I'm in, Ormond Beach, Florida, is everywhere I go, somebody's going to walk up and say something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredible experience. It's an incredible honor to be that established in your community where you don't have to necessarily advertise. Because if anybody asks where you should go because you want your son to do martial arts or your daughter to do martial arts, everybody already knows where to go and point you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredible honor to put in that kind of time and realize that it was all worth it by far.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, as you can tell, the gray is coming in stronger every year. I have
Mm-hmm.
absolutely had the honor of having these students from the past, and it's funny. They ask you, "I don't know if you remember me," and before that even comes out of their mouth, it's like, "Hey, Ryan, hey, Jessica." Like I
If
remember.
you recognize them though, they can change a little bit.
Well, and you want to know what's great? And by the way, Ormond Beach, how big? You say small city.
I don't even know what the population is anymore. I'd have to Google it.
Okay.
But Ormond Beach is just north of Daytona, and it's a one. Let me put it this way: John D. Rockefeller retired to Ormond Beach, so his research department is probably better funded than mine, right? It's paradise.
Right. Well, I'm right in the heart of Ventura County in Moore Park, California, and Moore Park has roughly 36,000 people,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a relatively small town. And you talk about everybody knows your name and everybody knows everybody. The
Mm-hmm.
great thing is that I've been able to stay in touch. Specifically with a lot of my black belts. I watch my black belts grow up and in my early years, and I still have to say that I still have the same feeling now that when they move on and do something else and they're not doing martial arts anymore, it takes a little piece of me with them. It's always hard
Mm-hmm.
to lose a student for
Of
whatever
course.
reason. But to be able to watch them go and play high school sports and go on to play college, and for them to come back. I mean, there's one particular student, and his family was a big part of our school in the early years. But I still see him. I see him in the gym almost every single day, and every time, it's a smile and a hug and a good conversation, and it's always a reminder too because he says it out loud. The things that you taught me when I was a child still stick with me now as an
Mm-hmm.
adult. And they're the things that I want to pass on to my kids. I mean, talk about an honor, a huge
Yes.
compliment to hear that on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis. It's one of the
Right.
things that I love about having been in this field for so long. I definitely wouldn't have it any other way. I'm
Yeah.
I'm
There are
very
so many
lucky.
people who do their job all day, every day, and never experience that kind of gratitude there's a lot of people who they just can't wait to forget about their job and shut it out of their mind. We are so lucky
Right.
to do. And I did a little googling while while you were talking, and yeah, 44,000.
Okay.
So that must be the magic number. 40,000 population is how you become an established icon. Is that's the sweet spot, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, listen, we got a little bit more time here, and I had a lot of questions for you that we just might not get to today. But I just want to remind anybody that is watching live, if you have any questions, throw them up there as we get ready to close things. But with martial arts, it's funny. I was just having dinner with a friend who he's had a long career. in the postal service, and he's super excited to retire. He's I can't wait to retire. I can't wait, like you said, to be done
Mhm.
with that job, and you being semi-retired, as you say. I mean, I don't know, like with the martial arts. Someone even asked me today, what's your exit strategy? And I'm thinking, death? I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, like, as long as my body will allow me to teach martial arts, I don't ever want to get out of this business. I don't
Mhm.
ever want to stop teaching. I don't ever want to stop training. Like, this
Mhm.
is this is who I am. This is what makes me. Um, but having said that, you have a semi-retired life, living
Mhm.
on a yacht in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Tell us about that. Was that a hard decision to kind of step away a little bit, or obviously
Um,
you have the ability to teach whenever you want to teach, right?
right.
So just tell me about it.
Well, I originally my martial arts instructor was also a sailor, owned a boat,
Mm.
and I had done a little bit of sailing with him. And then later, when I had the means, I bought a small boat and started sailing. And then my wife said, I'm not getting on that thing unless it has a bathroom. So I bought a bigger boat with a bathroom. And we started sailing. And then one particularly harsh Thanksgiving week, we sailed up to St. Augustine in 40 degrees and 40 knots of wind. And my wife said, I'm not getting on that boat unless you have protection from the weather. So I bought a cruising catamaran. And so it just continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And, one of, I was definitely the kind of person where I used to jump into a ring. I competed in a kind of a light form of MMA called sport jiu-jitsu, where it's a combination of punching, kicking, and grappling. And I'm somewhat of an adrenaline junkie. And I have motorcycles and muscle cars and all kinds of stuff. I mean, I moved down here originally because I wanted to be a fighter pilot, right? That's the kind of I like to go fast and do things. And one of the big thrills with sailing is doing long cruises, right? And my wife loves to travel, and so we kind of put the two things together. So we took our boat, and a sailboat. My sailboat is fast for sailboats, and the a cruising speed on a good day is about 10 knots, okay, which is about 11 and a half miles an hour. If you don't have time, you're not really getting anywhere at 11 and a half mile an hour, right? So we kind of structured it so we do 3 months on, 3 months off. So we spend 3 months back here in Florida, where we have all our friends and our favorite restaurants, all our students. I have my muscle car and my motorcycle and all my other toys, and we enjoy ourselves. And usually after about 3 months in civilization, we start missing the yacht. And then we'll fly out to where we have the yacht, and we'll spend 3 months sailing. And to a degree, sailing on a yacht is glamping, so to speak, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. This boat has 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, a living room, big 4 burner stove and refrigerator and freezer and every air conditioning and everything you would want. But it still is glamping to a degree. So after about 3 to 4 months on the boat, we start missing our friends and everything else. So we found it to be a really good balance to go back and forth. And just when you're really missing one thing, we make the switch, and then we come back 3 months later, and it's been a great life. We've been doing that now for 3, 4 years, and we spent 2 years cruising the Bahamas, a year in the Dominican Republic. In the last cruise, we went from the Dominican Republic across the southern coast of Puerto Rico, through the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, to St. Martin, St. Lucia, Bequia, and then to Carriacou, which is a small island just north of Grenada. So we're almost to South America now. We've pretty much done the entire Caribbean, and it's great. It's challenging. I need for myself, I need that. I need a goal. I need challenge as an entrepreneur and everything else. So the idea of going further and further is exciting and satisfying to me. So
Hmm.
I enjoy that. We get to meet new people, and the people you meet on a yacht tend to be vetted to a degree. You meet some really interesting people who have done some great things in their life. You sit across your cockpit from someone who has managed to afford a yacht they don't give them for free, right? So they accomplished something in their lives. Then they managed to navigate it, a couple thousand miles. Well, then they probably understand the laws of physics. They're a pretty competent human being, and you can get into some great conversations in those situations. So just like you meet people who have survived in the ring, right? It's a test of self-reliance. You get in a ring, and you can't blame anybody else if you don't come out on top, right? It's
Right.
you against the world. And when you're on a sailboat in the middle of the Atlantic and something goes wrong, guess who's fixing it? You
That's
are.
right.
There isn't anybody else coming to
Figure
solve
it
your
out.
problem, right? So I enjoy the challenge of sailing. So the boat is salt water is a caustic substance that is actively trying to kill you, and you're in a constant battle to keep it at bay.
Well, hey, listen, congratulations. Good for you. I mean, that's awesome. You enjoy what you've done in life and you're enjoying your life now, which is awesome. I just have one last question, and this one's going to make you think back a little bit, maybe, or maybe you already have the answer in your head. But if you could go back to 1995 when you first got started with your martial arts school and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy Apple stock.
And there you go. Simple answer. Simple.
No, it would definitely be to pursue the after school model that much quicker. I did, but like a lot of schools, I started my after school program as kind of an add-on to supplement things, where my school at that time was probably 80% evening classes and 20% after school. And it wasn't until the 2008, 2009 financial crisis that I realized that my after school program wasn't taking the hit that my evening classes were. And a lot of that has to do with just my area. One of the biggest industries in my area is home building. Okay, we got a lot of retirement communities and such. And so at the time in 2008, 2009, the housing industry was booming. My school was booming, and 3/4 of my students were the children of contractors and electricians and carpenters in the building industry. So when the real estate industry just collapsed, half my students moved away to other states because the work just dried up. And I realized that my after school program was taking care of that, was surviving that as compared to my evening classes. And I decided then to just look at my school with a magnifying glass and say, how can I fit more after schoolers in this facility, and what can I do, and how can I structure my schedule to maximize its impact? And I did that then because it was a requirement if I was to survive, because I was thinking I may need to, become a contractor and go to Afghanistan if I don't figure out a way to solve this problem. So,
Right.
if I had to tell myself anything, it was just, yes, your instincts are right. Pursue that after school program. It's going to be huge and change everything.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, man, this has been a heck of a conversation. It's great catching up. And, obviously we follow each other on social media, and I see you out there doing your thing, but just to have the conversation today and to share it with our audience has been amazing. And thank you for your time, and thank you for, all you do in your community, and enjoy getting out there on the water again soon.
Sure, you'll have to you and Jackie will have to fly out sometime. Like I said, I've got 4 bedrooms. It's just me, Sarah, and the dog. There's plenty of room.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invite. Guys, hey, it's been a heck of a day, and it's just getting started. So hope you've enjoyed this. Hope that you'll share it with your friends and family. And we're looking forward to the next guest next week. So, Mr. Lee, thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having us. Talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Go make it a great day.